young ones, older ones, anyone who wants to come forward and do crafts, more than welcome to, or you're free at any point to get up and get a strip of paper to write down a question, or take out your phones, because I know you have phones, and I know you know how to text. So I'd love to see your questions once I get up here. Chris and Katie Beth, if we put stock in where we come from and who our parents are, they've got some good genes. Steve and Beth Madison are amazing people. I don't say that just because they're family, I say that because they're amazing. And Chris follows in their footsteps. And Jeff Fletcher and Karen are amazing pastors in our churches. And if that was just enough, that would be enough to say, hey, we need to hear them, what they have to say. But in their own rights, these are amazing people, brothers and sisters, and I love them dearly. Great friends, good people. I won't talk you up too much because I don't want you getting a big head, especially you, Katie Beth. I say that because I love her like a sister, and we've been good friends for a long time. And so when they decided that they were going to go to Peru, I was super stoked about it, very excited to hear what God was doing in their life and how he's using them. And I'm just really excited to hear what they have to say today, and glad that they are willing to come and to tell us their story and to tell us what they did. God moves in amazing ways in their life, and I'm glad that we were able as a family to be a part of it, and that we're able to invite them in and hear what they have to say. So come on forward and let's give them a big welcome.
I think we'll stand mostly down here.
Just a little quicker.
All right, so hello, I'm Chris, obviously, not Katie. This year we had the good fortune and all that to be invited to go on the LHI Peru trip. And I think God had been preparing both of us for a while for missions. I know, if any of you know my grandpa James Madison, he was very involved in the Africa missions later in his life and helped found many churches over there. And just the work he did was incredible. And I grew up sort of, just in awe of all the stuff that he was doing. And I kind of knew that, okay, I want to do something like that at some point in my life. And, I've been feeling led to that for a while, and for me, this year, so I kind of had a fortuitous change in employment status, and was sort of like, okay, I'm unemployed now, God, like, what do you have for me? The last time I kind of switched jobs, God had done some amazing things in my life and really changed things up for me, so I was like, okay, this is good, what do you have for me, God? And it was right during that time I was praying a lot, and, I think I should do some missions trips, and it was like within a day or two, Amber texted me and was like, hey Chris, your name came up about the Peru trip. Would you like to go? And it was that moment, I was like, okay God, this is it, thank you. All right, yes. Didn't even really think twice about it. And so I was signed up.
Yeah, and I've always loved serving and being involved in local missions. I went to Up Project for 4 years and I just loved it. And then when I was over at ABC, hearing a lot more about the Africa missions and being living next to Josiah and Amber and hearing about Peru, I always knew it was something I wanted to do. And I knew Amber and I had talked a lot about it, and so my name was going to be there for some point. And so as soon as she messaged me, I was like, yeah, I'll pray about it, but it's going to be a yes. So I was super thankful for the opportunity to go this year.
So, we can go to the first slide. So we flew down to Peru. This is Granger, kind of centered around my house. To kind of give you an idea of where Peru is. Way down there, below the equator, pretty much due south of here, several thousand miles. And it's pretty mountainous and dry there. We'll go to the next one. So that's our team. The guy sitting to the left of me, Alex, on over is the team that kind of went around. The two ladies on the left there are sort of the leader and her daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, daughter. Maria, she leads the Lima church.
In Lima there. And this is us in sort of kind of a main square in the capital of Lima.
Yeah, so this is the building that they meet in. They used to have a big, thriving congregation, but then Maria's husband passed away, and she's been trying to keep up with it and pastoring, but it's kind of died down a little bit. So we ended up meeting there, and like Josiah was playing this old dusty guitar, and we met on, I think we flew in on Monday, so this was Tuesday night. We met with them, and we just talked. Alex did a lot of the talking this day, just because he can understand them a little bit better, and he can speak fluent Spanish.
Yeah, and he did a lot of sort of like basics and going over some fundamentals of the faith with a couple people that were newer. So then after that, we flew over to Huancayo, which is just sort of a hop, skip, and a jump over the mountain range there, and we went to Huancayo. Its elevation's about 11,000 feet, so it's way up there, and we were having some issues with the elevation.
Yeah,
But
it's not fun not being able to breathe.
Yeah, it's typical for Peru.
So then we got in, I forget which night, the days all blurred together, but we got in and we kind of settled down, and then we found out we were going to be going to this preschool the next morning. So it was like around 10 o'clock at night. This was all set up. We get there at 9 a.m. And we have this whole group of little kiddos one of the parents made us breakfast, which was really amazing. They made us these little loaves of bread, which was cool. Like, they was such short notice that we were coming. But we played around the ball. Like, we would toss it around, and they would tell us their names. And we did some Bible studies and some crafts with them. Mackenzie McLean, she plans all the VBS programs, and then we all get the supplies, and then we a couple of the places we're only there one time, so we do what we can. And some of the other locations we're able to be there for 3 days and go through all the programs with them.
Yeah, so this one's on the screen now is a little more last minute. We were at the preschool, and I guess somebody, texted their wife who worked at this school, and she just real quick asked the principal, and they said, hey, yeah, we can throw some kids together in a big room, and yeah, come to a VBS with them. And so we're just like, yeah, sure, let's go, let's see them. And we set up VBSs for the smaller churches we have in Peru, maybe 30 kids max. And we just, kind of walk over to this place and walk in the room, and there's like 150 children in there. And they're like just going nuts. And they're having a good time. And so we're just like, all right, let's go. And so we kind of huddled and got our VBS stuff all figured out, got our songs ready, and just had a sort of impromptu little VBS lesson with them, and sang a bunch of songs, and they were very high energy, but it was a fun time.
Yeah, and what really stood out to me and what was so amazing was that you just don't see that in our schools in the U.S. Christianity is almost banned, and so it was really exciting that these couple of schools really wanted us there to talk to their kids and teach them about the Bible and sing songs, and so that was just a really awesome thing to be able to do. So yeah, this is the couple girls in the front were scooting out to dance class in a little bit, but this is a smaller group that stayed around and we got to talk to and get to know a little bit.
And they had a good time. So after that, we did basically some kind of street evangelism, street ministry. So we'd go out and just kind of start playing with stuff, and Josiah would, set up with his guitar and stuff and start singing some songs. And we try to get a group of kids around, okay, hey, do you want to learn about the Bible? Do you want to talk about God? And so then we, kind of launch into some songs and some lessons and some crafts with kids on the street. And the leaders from the local churches would come by, and the churches that were there to visit. And so they'd be kind of there, chatting with the parents and inviting them to church. And so we could kind of help maybe grow their ministry a bit in that area.
But it was really exciting because we went 2 or 3 days in a row, and we got to see some of the same kids that were coming back. So that was really exciting because you really start to get to know them a little bit more, and you get to make more of an impact when you see them for 2 or 3 days in a row. So
funny little story here. This guy came up. A lot of people just go and hang out in the parks and will do things in the parks. And this guy came up and he was real interested to see some Americans there, and he came up and he's like, hey, I have a son who lives in America, and he was very proud of that. And he gave me this baseball cap, and it's made in America, and that's, how cool is that? What does it say? And it was a Make America Great Again hat. And we were like, well, people down here don't really like what your hat says so much. But he was just happy to have an American-made hat. And so we chatted with him for a little bit, and he was teaching traditional Peruvian dances to children in the park. And so that was just a fun little encounter we got to have with this guy.
Yeah, we saw it a lot. It was pretty common, like they all meet in the parks and practice their dancing, and like it was really cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did some songs, like we translated everything into Spanish. So we did Padre Abraham.
Father Abraham.
And This Little Light of Mine, which is...
Esta Lucecita. And we would do crafts with the kids and really got to have some one-on-one time, talking with them, asking them their name, and working on the crafts with them.
And then we met, so during the day we went and we did we went to the schools, then in the afternoon we would go to the parks, and then at night we met at one of the ladies of the church, her house. And there's a couple different churches around the area, but we all just met in one central location. This was one of the nights, I think that was the first night. That was our big group that we had. But we would start some nights at 6, and we'd go to 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And I know you like to tell us about everybody's problems.
Oh, yeah. So, well, this is David Donaire. He's one of the pastors down there. And the guy on the left, I cannot...
Alex.
Is that Alex? Okay, I can never remember his name. And so they're a couple of the leaders in one of the churches. And so we're there for church, and we do, you kind of see, I think Josiah spoke, Maggie spoke, Edmund spoke, everyone spoke. And we'd go for hours and hours. And you're there, and the whole time, you'd have someone sitting here like this, like propping up their arm, cramping in their arm.
Having an iPad in their hand, like that's even heavier.
Yeah. And it's like, what are they doing? And so you kind of like, try to get a glance over at their phone, and you'd finally see their screen, and there'd be like 8 faces all smushed up, sitting around this phone on the other end watching. And we kind of asked around, it's like, so what's that? And they're like, well, this church, they couldn't afford to all drive here, they're an hour or 2 away. So they sent this guy. And so he, they all pooled their monies, got him a bus ticket. He came to the service, and he's, FaceTiming all them so they can all watch as well.
Yeah, or people recording hours and hours of it to take back home.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool to see how excited they were and like how much they craved like hearing the message.
Yeah.
And then this was really awesome. So John and Alice Railton like to go to Menards a lot, and they collected all these reading glasses. And so we were able to take 50 pairs and hand those out. But it was really exciting because a lot of these people, they don't have access to reading glasses. And so they were finally able to see, and just the excitement on their faces, and how a couple ladies immediately grabbed their Bibles, and it's like, now I can read the word and see what it really says. And so that was just a really awesome thing to get to experience and hand those out.
Yeah, and so they were very excited for that. One of the ladies, I think it was the lady on the left on the last one. So Alex was kind of going into some of the, some pretty deep topics with them of hey, and I didn't quite catch all of this. My Spanish is okay, but he was really getting in depth of hey, the way that this word is translated from the Greek into Spanish, it's not exactly right. And some of you have some incorrect beliefs because you see this word and you think it means this, but really, if you go to the Greek and probably stuff that Jake does all the time, if you look at that Greek, you'll realize that Spanish word's all wrong. It should be this Spanish word. And if you read it that way, you get a more clear understanding, and you wouldn't think this incorrect thing. And so he was going through that, and one of the ladies, she'd never heard this before, that Jesus didn't speak Spanish, that the Bible is not originally written in Spanish, and there's the Greek and the Hebrew and all that. That's more the original. That's the true Bible, and she was pumped. And so she had her reading glasses, and Alex passed around his Greek version of the Bible, and she was sitting there, and she was like, I can't read this, but I want to. This is the Bible? This is closer to the truth? I want this. And so she was gung-ho, somebody start teaching me Greek. I want to read this. I want to be that much closer to what Jesus actually said. And Alex was a little bit well, it takes a while to learn Greek, and I kind of need my... Yeah. But it was really cool to see that level of enthusiasm, that if there was something that was true, she wanted to know it. She did not want to be further from the Bible, more translations. She wanted to be right there, reading the very words of Christ. And I don't know, I've never had the desire to learn Greek. I'm not big on languages. But it was really cool to see that, that desire and that passion for the truth.
So yes, so this was a new experience for us. We had Sunday school in a storage unit. So we decided we were going to meet at like 10 o'clock. We didn't leave our hotel till 10:30. That's the thing. Nobody really pays attention to the clock in Peru. So that was interesting for us to kind of just like go with the flow more. But we showed up and we started setting up some chairs, and people started showing up, and then eventually we started preaching. And almost everybody in our group, except for me, because I can't read or speak Spanish very well, gave some sermonettes. And I think we had church for about 4 or 5 hours that day. But it was just really cool, again, to see how people they wanted to sit here, they wanted to hear the word. And then eventually, which there will be some pictures in a little bit, we took the kids outside and we did VBS programs with them. We sang some songs, did some crafts, and really got to know them. They're not as excited to sit inside for 4 hours like their parents are, so we were able to get to know them better and talk to them.
So these are a couple of fun things. Rick just was being goofy that day, and he wanted a picture of him with the mannequins outside this store.
He made some Peruvian ladies bust out laughing though.
Yeah. So he wanted that picture. So there's a picture of Rick being goofy. He made it into the slides. And then this little dog. I'm not the biggest fan of dogs, but these people were so proud. There's just sort of communal dogs that just are stray packs running around the streets. And this little dog was one of these packs and ran up to us, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is the Peruvian dog. This breed's only here. It's our national dog. It's our thing. And check it out." And it's just the ugliest dog I've ever seen in my life. It's just
the kids are all like, "Hey, come here, come pet me." The dog licks my foot, and I'm like, "Nope, get away."
Yeah. It has no hair except for on its head.
And on its paws too. I think it's super fluffy.
Yeah, it's gross. So that's the Peruvian dog. So after that, we spent several days in Huancayo, and which is very high up in the mountains, and then we flew over to Chulucanas, which is more in the valley, a lot more lush and green. We needed to have malaria pills with us for while we were here because it was by this river, and
very hot. We went from very cool to very hot.
It went from about 40 degrees in the in July in the peak of the day to about
80
or 90.
Yeah.
But it was at the foot of the mountains a bit, and it was just very beautiful there. But so we went from Lima, which was the capital, more money, but not a lot, to Huancayo, which is a city of about 1 million people, a bit smaller, a little more rural, to Chulucanas, which was a village.
All they had were little motorcycles, which in a little bit you may see one, but these little imagine a motorcycle with a little cart on the back for someone to sit in. That was all they drove around there. But it was super funny because we were traveling, I think we left, so we have to fly into the central airport. So it's so Lima is where it's at, then we have to fly over to our other little city, and then we have to fly back into Lima and then fly to our next little city. And so we've been traveling the whole day, and we're okay, we're gonna go have dinner and then relax at our hotel. So we get back to our hotel about 6:30. And then somebody just starts banging on our doors, and we're like, "Whoa, what's happening?" They're like, "Hey, we've had kids here for an hour waiting for you. 60 kids, come do some VBS programs with them." So we ended up going and having this huge group, our biggest group of the entire time we were there. And again, we did our VBS programs. We sang with them, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, and we preached late into the night, and we were there several nights, and each time we would preach, just people from the community would come. And so it was basically another storage unit type of just sort of cement.
Somebody's restaurant, kind of in a storage unit.
Yeah, but it was just cement walls, dirt floor, just a building, It would maybe keep the rain off. And so we'd sit there at night and we'd have services, and we had room inside for maybe 40 people if you really crammed in, which they weren't afraid to cram people in. And then people just keep coming from the community. And so then we had 40 people inside, and then we had another 60 or 70 people sitting on chairs outside of the building, and just kept coming, and it was incredible. Just, no matter how late we went, they wanted to hear more of the word.
Yeah, and so it was really cool because one night we were able to, as a group, pay to bus in some people from Paita, which a couple years ago they spent an entire week as a team in this area. So they grew really strong relationships with some of the people. But that's the hard part, is there's so many people, which is why this trip we broke it up a little bit more. But they were able to come, and you were just able to see like how that little bit of time that they had spent there, how those relationships were still strong, and they were able to talk. And stuff, but
yeah, and it was amazing that they'd spent a whole week in this one church several years ago, and really got to know everybody. And now it's like 3 years later, and like everybody from that church drove for hours to come see us, and they were catching up with Amber of how's this going? Are you still playing soccer in your school, and all this stuff. And it was really cool to see the impact that that previous trip had made on their lives. And for us to get to know them, kind of for the first time and talk with them. They had a million questions about just everything in American life.
Yeah, but that's the thing that like we want to do with these trips, is be able to encourage like the people of the church and like the kiddos, and really like form those relationships where, yeah, you may not get to see them every single year, but every couple years you get that, and then it just helps them like want to stay in the church more and just have more of a connection to their other churches, because this is able to bring everybody, in those little cities together a little bit more often than they probably would.
Yeah. So these are a couple of the pastors, and on the left it's his wife, and on the right it's his daughter. Cesar Huertas and Jose Angulo. And they're leaders kind of in the northern region of Peru. They do a lot of traveling around and visiting churches, and a lot of traveling around. So they're older gentlemen, and they're dealing with arthritis and diabetes and stuff like that. But they travel nonstop all week to different churches in the region. And by churches I mean like there's a family over here that is starting to believe how we do, and they need some encouragement. So Tuesday night he drives over there, and by drive I mean he gets a taxi. Because he can't afford the taxi, he rides in the trunk of the taxi, because that only costs half as much. And so he's riding around in the trunk of taxis, and it's not like the trunk of like a normal car.
Yeah.
It's these little motorcycle things with.
So it's like a cart attached to the back.
Yeah, so there's the normal seats that other people sit in, that's like an actual seat, and then there's like a little storage thing, about that big on the back, where you can put like a bag and tie it down. He sits there and bounces his way down the road. And it's kind of rough, but that's what they have to do, because every single day they're going around to different families in the region, traveling hundreds of miles to visit all these people, and obviously like they're not rich people.
And so Jose over there on the right, and his daughter. So his daughter is married to Edwin, and Edwin is actually the gentleman who kind of like, this is his conference that he invites Amber to, and she creates the team and brings us. But it's really cool, his story, because he used to be a pastor in this really giant, like he had a congregation of 1,000 people, and he was making thousands a month. And then I think he found Anthony Buzzard and some others, and just started studying so much and came to it. So now he's a pastor, and this he goes around and travels, not making really any money now, but he just he wanted to follow the truth, and so he left all of that, friends, some of his family behind, to come to believe what he does now. Which he's even to, like a couple of the guys, it was Alex and a couple others were part of this big group that he had too, and so he studied with them, and now they've come to know what we believe.
Yeah, and so seeing their dedication to give up, I feel like in America, changing denominations is not a big deal, but for them, you have to start a whole new life. All your old friends, all the pastors he was part of, his job, his income is just gone. And they were kicked out. He was telling us about some of the things that his old denomination, what the leaders of it were saying about him. And it was unrepeatable things. Just really horrible stuff. And just, tarnishing his reputation and really trying to ruin his ministry. And that's rough to hear. Like, aren't we all supposed to be Christians and working together? But they, I guess, did not have that opinion. So this is one of the little villages that they go to. It's very close to Chulucanas. It's called La Encantada, and it is a village, like 4 or 5 roads total. And we went there, and the house that we were going to meet in was not big enough for all of us. So they just parked. You can kind of see on the right there in blue, there's a little, one of the motorcycle carts where they kind of have like the front wheel of the motorcycle and they chop off the back and put on this little 2-wheeled seat. They blocked off both ends of the road with that, set up chairs in the middle of the road, and just, we're going to have church in the street. And so we did.
So we went knocking on all the doors, inviting the kiddos, and we got a big crowd, which is pretty awesome for it being a village of 5 streets. But
we got a decent percentage of that entire village to come to church with us that evening.
So we did a couple hours with the kiddos, again going over our VBS stuff, and then later on into the night, all the adults from the villages came, which was a pretty big deal because the soccer game was on, or football game was on that night. And so we were able to tear people away from their TVs and talk to them. And then with the kiddos too, like you can kind of see there's been a couple photos. We did some crafts with them that are going to end up being LHI things that you guys might see soon.
Yeah, actually the previous, or now 2 previous picture is one of the things that Amber and mostly Amber would do with the kids is she would have these kind of like call and respond little chants with them. Dios me creo, God created me. And she'd have different ones that, God loves me, and, God cares for me, and, I have worth. Because that's not something that these kids are really taught that much, that they have worth, that they are loved, that, God cares for them. And so it's just one of those, and they'd go back and forth on each one, each time. They do silly voices of Dios me creo, and Dios me creo, and, just to get the kids excited about it, going back and forth. But it's a message that they need to hear, that they have worth, and that they're not going to get all the time. And you can really see the kids excited and happy to hear that because it gives them hope. So while we were here, we went late into the night, and the kids were like falling asleep, and so we're like doing crafts with them and trying to keep them quiet while they're getting kind of ready to go to bed because it's getting close to midnight. But the preaching's still going on. There's still messages that Alex and Edwin need to give and the adults want to hear it. So they kept going.
Yeah, I think this was our last night there before we flew out, but I think this was our longest set of services. I think we got to this little village around 4 o'clock, and we didn't leave until about midnight. So that was really exciting to be able to really give it all our last little energy and our messages and things. And then I think we ended up giving a lot of our supplies because we each have a packet of VBS stuff, so we were able to give that to them so then they can go and they can also share those with their families and the people around them.
All right, so different kind of theological issues and things that they deal with there that are a little different, I think, than it's things that we see here, but it's things that are very, very, very big for them there. Catholicism, obviously we're in South America, Catholicism is just big there. And so it's moving more towards Protestantism, but there's a strong Pentecostal influence over everything. And so to have a sort of Protestant, non-Pentecostal denomination is very much a minority there. There's not many other denominations that are kind of like us in that way. So everything that the denominations there are doing is just sort of different for the culture there. There's the Movimiento Misionero Mundial, which is the global missionary movement, which is the large, more Pentecostal denomination that Edwin and several of his pastors had come from. It's very powerful. It's basically, if you're not Catholic, you're that in Peru. And so there's a lot of animosity from the 3M group towards the Church of God there because they just don't like Edwin now. And So one of the things that sort of came with Catholicism there is there's a low ownership of beliefs. That there's just a feeling that, well, you know, the priest tells me what the Bible says, and the priest tells me what the truth is, and I just believe that, and I take him at his word, because he's probably right. And so that's a lot of things that like Alex would teach about, you know, with going through, you know, the Greek and the things, and kind of showing them like, hey, you know, here's the history of the Catholic Church and how their beliefs came to be, and here's how they're not really in the Bible, and here's what the Bible really says on these things. Kind of showing them like, hey, you know, you can't just believe these people, and, you know, don't believe me, he would say, you know, like, read it for yourself. You have a Bible, you know, search out the truth for yourself. And definitely I'd say in the churches there are quite a few people, probably higher than the average population there, that do seek the truth, but there are a lot of people that just come just to hear what the pastor says and believe him. And so that's one of the things the pastors have to deal with is like, hey, you got to own this yourself. Another thing that was odd to me, so I prepared some messages before we went, and I had different topics I wanted to talk about and different things, and I even, you know, asked like, hey, you know, what are things that they deal with? What can I talk about that is going to help them, you know, some? And Amber asked, and then we got some things back, and I prepared messages, and we translated them to Spanish, and I practiced speaking them in Spanish. And then Alex, the message, you know, because he's more local, and he knows their culture and stuff, knows really what they're dealing with, and he really has a good way of like, okay, you know, cuts to the heart of things, like, no, you guys are dealing with this, and you really need to change this. And you know, he'd get them where they are. And I think some people were squirming in some of his messages. And I gave mine, and I think it had an impact, but his had so much more because he knew what they were dealing with and really what they needed to change. One of the things he talked about was Judaism, that we don't need Judaism in Christianity anymore. And I was sort of like, well, yeah, like, no, we don't need to do sacrifices. You know, the New Testament's kind of clear on this. You know, like a decent percentage of the New Testament's, you know, about like, hey, you know, you don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to do the sacrifices. You don't have to do all this stuff. And so he gave a message about that, and I was like, and he really went on about it for quite some time. I was like, why are you talking about that for so long, Alex? Like we get it. And he was like, yeah, you get it, but they don't. That this church here, that they want to go back to the sacrifices of the Old Testament and the food restrictions and like all the stuff that you read in the Old Testament that just keeps going on and on and on. They want to do like all that stuff. And it was like, and it's not really in the Bible, and it's kind of weird, but it's something that in their culture that they're dealing with. And so it was just interesting that like, I don't really have to deal with that, but they do. And then there's the very language-specific translations, misunderstandings versus that, you know, that they deal with that we wouldn't really deal with because, like, maybe our, you know, the English version of the Bible is translated a little better in, you know, in a certain verse, and theirs is a little more off, and where ours maybe is off, theirs is correct. And so there's, you know, just a lot of very detailed things there that we wouldn't really know about. And so that sort of brought me to, like, it's interesting seeing the diversity in the church. Seeing that, you know, there's things that we get that they don't really get. But I also think that there's things that they get that we don't really get. The sense of community that they have was incredible. And the passion that they have for the truth and for the Bible was something that you just don't really see in American churches. That they want the truth more than anything. And I think we enjoy the truth, but I don't think we have a passion for it like they have. So I think that there's things that we can teach them, but there's a lot of things that we can learn from them as well. And one of the things that Alex would say a lot, because he's from Nicaragua, which is Central America, and we're from North America. We're not Americans. Don't say that down there. You get in trouble. We're not Americans. We are from North America, or the United States. And so one of the messages was, you know, here in this church, we have North America, we have Central America, and we have South America. We have all of America, all the Americas united in belief and in Christianity. And I think that's really cool to see what everyone there can bring and what we can learn from each other. And I think that's one of the benefits of doing missionary work is, yes, you know, I can help them a bit, but even more almost, they can help me and open my eyes to just a lot of things that I wouldn't think of every day. and sort of break me out of the comfortable little mold I've, have for myself here in America and open my eyes to some different things.
Yeah, it was a really awesome trip. We learned a lot. Oh, we'll talk about this first.
Okay. Do you want to go for it? I'll talk to one. Okay. So one of the things that while we're there, obviously there's a lot of need, there's a lot of poverty, and LHI has a fairly limited budget. We can't just we're not the Red Cross. We can't come in with piles of cash and just solve the issues. And so when we're going through their needs, we have to really be discerning of like how can we help them most. And so one of the things is kind of what I was talking about earlier is the transportation for these pastors, getting to all these different churches. That these guys have medical bills and they have to feed their family somehow, and also travel like 6 days a week to get to all these other communities and other churches in order to spread the gospel. And so one of the things that thanks to the generosity of Timberland and Family Bible and a lot of different people, the trip was a little bit overfunded actually, and so we were able to say like, hey, there's some extra here and there's a need here, because we're wondering like how can we help these pastors get to all these different communities, and is there anything we can do to because they're doing that just for the church. That's not for them at all. That's just for the church. Yeah,
and that's something we have to be careful about when we're giving, is we can't, buy his diabetes medicine, because then there's so many sick people everywhere. And, but we can support his ministry, because then that takes a load off of him, so he's able to put more money towards his medical bills. Because really what he's doing, he can't afford to do. But he's doing it anyway because he just has a passion for spreading the truth and going to these people who don't have anybody there.
Yeah. So thanks to your guys' generosity and generosity of others, we were able to set aside some money so that the whole church in Peru can have basically their transportation costs for going to different churches and for ministering covered. I think it was at least 6 months we calculated out that we could cover and get these pastors where they need to be. And so that's one thing. If you're ever looking to give, or wondering like how can I help these missions, it's not very glamorous, and it's not, it's not very glamorous. But if you give to the LHI General Missions Fund, when money is in that fund, and a missionary from that's working in Russia or Africa or Peru runs into a need like this, they can say, hey, we do have money already there, we can meet this need. Or
if there's a special, like for us now, like my heart is in Peru, like that will be the place where like I want to give towards. And so that's the thing too, if there's like, for Chris, he's got Africa, which is a big passion on his heart because of his family and different things. So if there's a particular country or place that you feel more led towards, you can specifically want to give towards that. But that's kind of why we go too, because sure, we could get emails all the time, and we do, that say, hey, I need money for this. But a part of us being able to go not only is, bringing them the truth that we have and talking and encouraging them, but it's also being able to see what needs they have, and really like feel okay doing that because we're there and we see it. And so, yeah, that's a big part of why we go. But not everybody is called to missions. So being able to donate is another great way to be involved. And prayer, lots of prayers. We would not have been able to go without everybody's prayers, and just prayers for safety and a successful trip and all of those things.
Yeah, it was a little bit wild at times, a little bit scary. Not like safety scary, but just like, hey, are we gonna make it to this next flight on time? Are we gonna make it here or there? Like, what's happening next at times? But God was with us for the whole thing, and we're really able to have an amazing trip. So if you've thought of questions or anything, that'd be great to organize those. I think we'll have a last song, and then rest for a couple minutes, and we'll come back in here and just chat and see what questions you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you.